welcome. Good morning, everyone. This is our first Reading Pals training module that is statewide. So this is very special for all of us coming together here. If you haven't already, please take a moment to introduce yourself in the chat. I'd love to know your connection to Reading Pals. We have many volunteers here, I'm sure, coordinators, teachers, parents. We'd also like to know which program and county you're from. And while you're at it, how many years have you been involved in the program? I know that we have volunteers that have been involved for 10 plus years, and some of you are brand new. Either way, we'd love to hear from you. So while you're doing that, I'm going to share a little bit about my role. My name is John Knight, and I'm the Reading Pals statewide director at the Children's Movement of Florida. We're a nonprofit movement of Floridians insisting on a strong start for all of Florida children. So I was involved in the creation of Reading Pals nearly 12 years ago. And our program has grown and evolved in so many ways since then, but we've always been consistent in prioritizing our three pillars. That's early literacy, mentorship, and social emotional learning. Today, we have representation from all 15 of our Florida-based programs, and that's from Miami all the way up to the Panhandle and Escambia County. Your weekly commitment as volunteer mentors is making a huge difference in the lives of thousands of young children from pre-K to third grade, and they need a little bit of extra help. Beyond the impact you're all making, I'm sure that your Reading Pals experience gives back to you as well. I know my weekly sessions make me feel younger and refreshed to have such a genuine experience with my students. My face actually last week was sore afterwards from smiling so much. So I'd like to share a quick snapshot of where we're at as a collective. So keep in mind, we're still recruiting and matching students every single week. So beyond your personal commitments, I ask you consider sharing this with your friends, family, colleagues, community members, so that we can continue to reach more children this year. As of November, we've matched 1,062 volunteers, and that's helped us connect 1,900 students. Our reach is across 483 classrooms at 170 schools around the state. And part of our grant includes plans to donate more than 40,000 books this year to our students to build at-home libraries. So thank you all for your contributions to this massive effort. Before I introduce our speaker, I'd like to encourage you to listen closely today. Share any questions that you have in our chat during our special guest presentation, because we're going to have time at the end of our session for a Q&A to address as many of them as we can. So also know this event is being recorded and will be available for viewing beginning next week. This is a new requirement for Reading Pals, where we're aiming to build on your initial local training to provide some knowledge and tools for you to use during your sessions this year. We certainly recognize that we're not all professional teachers, although we do have quite a few. So we're going to try to keep things simple. If you walk away with even a couple ideas of how this could help your students or your children, then I would call this a success. So now on to our special guest and presenter this morning, Coco Banks. She's a seasoned reading and literacy specialist with 20 years of teaching experience across 3 U.S. states, California, Washington, and Florida, and 3 countries, her native Kenya, South Africa, and the U.S. Her passion for literacy stems from her own bilingual upbringing and journey to learn English as a second language. Coco primarily taught lower elementary school, and her commitment to literacy deepened when one of her first grade students was struggling with reading. She sought Orton Gillingham training through the Lucy Project, becoming a dedicated volunteer. Since then, she earned a Master of Education in Literacy and is now completing a practicum for certification as a dyslexia specialist. Coco's witnessed the transformative powers of these methods and adoption of the science of reading, making her a staunch advocate for continued professional development to address reading instruction gaps. Welcome, Coco. So nice to see you.
Thank you, John. It is a real honor to be among volunteers spreading literacy and the love of reading to students all over. So thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
And I am going to share my screen. I always hope for this to be a smooth transition. Do you see my slide?
Yep, everything looks great.
Okay. So today's presentation is titled A Snapshot of the Science of Reading with Practical Tools. I am Coco Wangui Banks. I'm also a volunteer with the Lucy Project, and I owe this current journey I'm on to the Lucy Project. And like I mentioned, the difference we all make as volunteers, we rarely see it fully, but we know in our hearts that we're really making a difference in children's and families' lives. So with the science of reading today, the agenda is going to be discussing what the science of reading is, what is phonemic and phonological awareness, look into phonics and decoding, fluency and comprehension with tools sprinkled all through this. And I hope that you take away some useful tools and also find this enjoyable and informative. So we'll first look at the science of reading. So Dr. Holly Lane, the director of the University of Florida Literacy Institute, defines the science of reading as the research that reading experts have conducted on how we learn to read. This body of knowledge, including research from the fields of education, linguistics, cognitive psychology, and neuroscience, has formed the basis of what we know to comprise effective reading instruction, in that it is explicit, systematic, and offers many opportunities to respond. Now, one of the things about the science of reading, and a lot of researchers were criticized for, is that there was not the leap that should have happened from research to the classroom. And so now you have all these wonderful organizations and these neuropsychologists who are bringing this science directly to the teachers, to the classrooms where it is needed and most beneficial. So when we read, our brains transform the shapes of letters and characters on a page into the sounds of spoken language. But how does the brain do this? Now remember, reading is a human invention. To grasp the alphabet, the brain first must learn to speak. Learning to speak is easy for a child because evolution has hardwired the brain to do so. We don't need to go to school to learn to speak. All we need is to experience the language and people around us. But we were not born to read. Humans have had to recycle the parts of the brain in the left hemisphere, such as parts that we use for face recognition, which is known as the ventral visual cortex, to recognize letters. And then we use those same circuits used for spoken language. So the challenge for beginning readers is to turn the letters into sounds that make sense because they are part of spoken language. So until this conversion of letter into sound is mastered, we cannot focus on the meaning of the word. An expert reader can convert an entire set of letters all at once. The conversion is still going on in your head, but at a much faster pace, what we call automaticity. So that's the level where we are. We look at a word and we can read it immediately. In fact, we can recognize, I can read on this slide, Broca's area, faster than I could say rabbit if you showed me a picture of a rabbit. That's the automaticity that's happened throughout, thanks to my reading teachers. So teaching children to read by learning whole words does not help the children. And remember my example of, the picture of the rabbit. If you show words to students as pictures, the most you're going to get out of them is 500 words. And what happens then is we have them in third grade where you have a teacher who says, but my student can read. No, your student is very good at memorizing, but unfortunately, they did not make that sound to letter correspondence, and so they really are not readers. So this skip this skips the important step of relating the grapheme-phoneme correspondences. And by teaching whole word reading, you are using the right hemisphere of the brain, and you are not training the brain to read. We have some children, for example, children with dyslexia, who just instinctively will try to read, and they have a more active right brain hemisphere when trying to read. And so it's important through explicit instruction to train them to use this left hemisphere of their brain. So our work as educators is to figure out what is the fastest way for our students to see how print relates to speech so they can integrate it and get on with the task of reading. When you are a skilled reader, language and print are no longer separate kinds of codes because they are deeply integrated throughout the brain. Our struggling readers tend to have an overactive right hemisphere, and we need to bring them back to the left hemisphere. And that is what one of the researchers, so you have different schools of thought in the science of reading. One, the simple view of reading brought by Koff and Tumner in 1986. This visual is perfect because it tells you linguistic comprehension times decoding is what will bring you reading comprehension. So if your decoding is 0 and you have high linguistic comprehension, you will still have a 0 reading comprehension. And same goes for the other way. If you can decode, but you don't know the meaning of words, you have a very limited vocabulary, then your reading comprehension is low because you do not understand what you are reading. The other school of thought, you have the other theory, the reading rope by Scarborough, that broke down, that looked at language comprehension, and you have the different strands of the language comprehension, which are background knowledge, vocabulary, language structures, verbal reasoning, literacy knowledge, and then the strands of word recognition, phonological awareness, decoding, and sight recognition. So as you're building up the strands of language comprehension and weaving them more tightly, you're increasing strategy in reading. And as the strands of word recognition are now coming together, you're increasing automaticity. And as all of this comes together, you are now creating the skilled reader who has fluent execution and coordination of word recognition and text comprehension. And that's where we want our students to be. Now, we see, of course, with the reading rope and Guff and Tumner's simple view of reading, they're really saying the same thing, right? So language comprehension is the simple view of reading's linguistic comprehension, and word recognition is what they had as decoding, and bringing those together brings a skilled reader. But we cannot skip these elements. All of these strands are important. And then, so just to look at a child's reading development, Chal in 1983 came up with the different stages of development. So you have stage 0 is the pre-reading stage from 6 months to 6 years. The child understands thousands of words, but can read few, if any. So that's where you're doing the dialogic reading, having a conversation about a book and, talking with them, singing with them, and immersing them in language. Now, stage 1 is the initial reading and decoding, which is from 6 years to 7 years. The child learns relation between letters and sounds, printed and spoken words, and can read simple text. Can also sound out new syllable words. So at this point, the child understands 4,000 words when heard, but can only read 600. This is where you really need to have that direct instruction and practice, relating the sounds of letters to the actual letter and the sounds of the English language, and reading of simple stories with words of high frequency. And again, building their background knowledge. And now you also want to build critical thinkers. Stage 2 is emerging fluency, 7 to 8 years. The child can read simple and familiar words with increasing fluency, and listening is more effective than reading. In stage 3, now you're starting reading for learning from 9 to 13 years. Reading and listening comprehension are equal for those who read very well. So that's where you want to provide increasingly more complex text to these students. And this is where, again, 9 to 13 years, we get them. It starts at the upper levels of elementary. And for those who did not have the proper sound to letter correspondence, they are having a really tough time understanding now these complex texts. Stage 4 is multiple viewpoints, which is what it's named, 15 to 17 years. And the students read a range of complex materials. Reading comprehension is better than listening comprehension. You actually now start gathering more from reading than you do from listening. And stage 5 is construction and reconstruction. That's where we are. It's 18 and beyond. You're reading for your own purpose. Your reading is efficient. And, unfortunately, some readers who really struggle will probably not comfortably get to stage 5, but our goal is for everyone to get to that stage 4, because then you're already a critical reader, critical thinker. You can navigate the world efficiently and with success. So now we'll go into the phonemic and phonological awareness, which is really that foundation of it after they've built their vocabulary. So phonemic awareness is the ability to notice, think about, and work with the individual sounds in words. Phonemic awareness plays a vital role in learning to read because it helps children connect the spoken language to the written language. In kindergarten, phonemic awareness predicts growth in reading ability. It is the single best predictor of later reading and spelling achievement in first and second grade. Without the ability to think about and manipulate the individual sounds in words, beginning and especially older struggling readers risk falling behind or never catching up to their peers. This is where you realize those songs that, for example, bingo, B-I-N-G-O, and you start taking away the letters. It's all fun for the children, but we really are teaching them we're teaching them to play with the letters, to play with the sounds, to manipulate them. Now, a phoneme is a speech sound, not an alphabet letter. Although there's an important connection between the two, and we want the students to make those connections, we know that in English, not all letters make the same sounds, and so we have to be very careful when we're talking about a phoneme and when we're talking about a grapheme. So speech sounds in print are represented by using virgules, those two lines, and an educator's own phonemic awareness skill will affect their ability to competently assess and teach these skills to their students. It's like if you're helping someone to read and you're telling them, to sound out the word, you need to be able to sound it out properly for them as well. And this feels a bit sometimes like tedious work, but we're going to do a bit of a quiz time, and I'm going to look at the chat. And would you please write down how many sounds are in the word chop? Three, yes. Ch, op. Very good. Yeah, all right. You all know your stuff. Okay, and the next one. How many sounds are in each of in this word? Think. A, k. Yes, you're right. 4. The is an individual sound. Very good. Judge. Yes, yes. Think is a hard one because of the absolutely. And what about judge? J, a, j. 3 sounds. Yes, 3 sounds. Okay. This is good practice. What about flash? O, a, sh. You've got the 4 sounds there. Yeah. Now, remember, some might teach f as a blend, but really it is 2 sounds. And then stripe, and remember, think of the phonemes, the sounds, not the written letter. And give it some time. This is a tough one. I, 5. Yeah, all right. And 8, Don't pay attention to the letters. 8. Yes, very good. 8. Brilliant. All right. So now with the phonemes, the sound in English, you have a vocalization. And this is fun to do with your students with using a mirror. You know, when you're doing sounds, 8 was 2 sounds. 8, because A is an English phoneme. 8. You're welcome, Stacy. So a voiced, so we have voiced and unvoiced sounds in English. And so you'll have the students put their hands to their throat and you say, you know, it's the vocal cords are activated, they're vibrating, okay? And an unvoiced sound, you will not feel any vibration. And this one, I would recommend take a screenshot of this. There is a method to the madness, but this is really important for you. Vowels are open and voiced. Now imagine if you start sharing this information with your students, even from pre-K to kindergarten, whenever you go through the vowels, you remind them, listen, vowels are open and voiced. This will help them later on as they do syllabication and as they learn to segment words. So start it already at the very beginning. Consonants close the mouth. Their sound is blocked or partially blocked by the tongue, teeth, or lips. Again, this is one of those, why do I have to do this? But it will come later on when you're teaching them about open and closed syllables. A closed syllable ends in a consonant. Consonants close the mouth. The syllable is closed, okay? So whenever you're going through that, you know, some little drills, there's a method to the madness. And if you've got the young ones already repeating this and knowing this about consonants and vowels, you've made their reading journey just that little easier. Okay, and then places of articulation. This is you know, it's funny because a lot of trainings I've been in, I've also had speech language pathologists in those trainings because, again, we're relating sound to the written form. So what we have here is you want to show again with the mirror, asking them if the sound is voiced or unvoiced, and also asking them where are they making this sound, right? So for p, it's happening here in the lips. It's the teeth and the lower lip. You know, it's the tongue and the teeth. And you have kids who have a really hard time doing this. So you also going through those sounds as they're having difficulty reading them, it's giving them that extra help. So you go through where the different positioning is as they're going through a sound, and they are now aware and they're now manipulating sound. They're becoming masters of the English language. So with consonants, one thing for us to know is you either have continuant or clipped consonants, okay? So the continuant consonants are the ones that can go on forever. A clipped consonant is a sound that's not prolonged. It's clipped, like think of the scissors, and you can share that with the kid. T, d. They're clipped sounds, okay? They don't drag on. And one thing that we'll tend to do if we're speaking, you know, a bit louder, we'll say t. Now we're adding the phoneme which exists in English. We can't do that. It has to be t, d. And that's a good thing for all of us working with young students to practice, because it's not easy to clip the sounds. But the reason why, as someone who is volunteering with young students to read, if someone is struggling to decode a word, or just with decoding, if you start with words that have continuant consonants at the beginning, then your student actually can blend much faster. For example, if you have mat, right? They are able to attach it much easier. With a clipped sound like k, at, it makes it a lot harder for them to understand that transition. So, you know, just to keep in mind when you're creating resources or you want to give drills to a student, think, okay, maybe I want to start with a word that starts with a continuant consonant. And that way you also give them that feeling of success. So another thing to know about consonants, remember I said they're blocked or partially blocked. So if a continuant consonant will always be blocked, right? You're staying in that same position. But the clipped consonants, they are partially blocked because they have a release. It's like t, d. And then the only consonant that is not, so the only consonant that is open is H. And this is a sound that doesn't exist in a lot, in many languages. So it's, but is actually a consonant sound, the only one that is open. All the others are blocked and closed. They close the mouth. So here we have consonants either partially blocked or blocked, either voiced or unvoiced, and either continuant or clipped. And there are some great resources on the internet, where you can teach students about voiced and unvoiced. And you'll put your hand to your throat and tell them, all right, turn on, we're going to say g, g, turn on your voice, g, you feel the vibration. Now turn off your voice, but, make the sound in the same place. K. So these are produced in the exact same place, but the voicing changes the sound. Why is this important? Because once your student is learning to read plural words, yeah? So you have pits, there's an S, that makes sense. Hugs, well, why isn't it a Z? Because G is voiced, so suffix S has to be voiced as well, all right? So like I said, there's a little method to the madness, but if you remember this with the voicing, and then with when you have especially that constant, that suffix S at the end of words that makes the Z sound, they'll get it. You're like, well, G is voiced. So the suffix S has to take on the voicing, because otherwise you'd have to stop. Hug, S, it doesn't flow. So what is phonological awareness? Phonological awareness is the ability to recognize and manipulate the spoken parts of words, including syllables, onset rhyme, and phonemes. It's the understanding of different ways that oral language can be divided into smaller components and manipulated. Spoken language can be broken down in many different ways, right? Like we saw here, syllables, onset rhyme, b, room, phonemes, and the individual sounds. And manipulating sounds also includes deleting, adding, substituting. So being phonologically aware means having a general understanding at all of these levels. Phonemic awareness falls within the umbrella of phonological awareness. Phonological awareness is to hear, identify, and make oral rhymes and manipulate syllables in spoken words. So here we have, so segmentation requires the ability to analyze the segments of a word and isolate them by syllables, onsets, and individual phonemes. So this illustrates the progression of syllable and phoneme awareness development along the linguistic hierarchy. So we've got our cute little pre-K students at word boundaries. And this one, what I love to do with my kids to understand, to the boundaries of words, is I'll create a yellow brick road. So just put like yellow paper on the floor and tell them we are going to take one step for each word. And we're going to make the sentence about the student, right? Because they love talking about themselves. So we'll say, all right, so Alice likes to play. Now, Alice might put one step for A and one step for Liz. And you're like, well, who is A and who is Liz? I thought you were just one person. And so it's just one step for Alice. Alice is just one person. And there, you have this two-syllable word, but they understand a word is not the sound. A word is its own concept. And by taking big steps, you're teaching them these word boundaries. It's a really fun game, creating these sentences and then taking steps for each word. And then, you can go on with words like cookie, right? I like to eat a cookie, but just one step for cookie. And then you go on to breaking down syllables. This one you should try with your kids with syllables. It is so much fun. Start with compound words like hot dog, because that makes sense. How many syllables? There are 2 syllables. Now, a syllable has one opening of the mouth, and every syllable has one vowel sound. So some people like to say, for example, how many openings of the mouth did you do? Hot dog. 2. Sometimes it's a bit harder for students. So what you can tell them is call the dog. Because how do you call the dog? Hot dog. And there, how many syllables? 2. September. How many times did you open your mouth? There are 3 syllables. And that one they never miss. So call the dog is just a trick I love to keep nearby. And then, so now you've seen they've got the word boundary, you can break down in syllables. And now we're going to go on to the onset rhyme, taking, being able to isolate the first sound in the word. So horse, what's that first sound? Now, Dr. Zeus is really good with alliteration, and a lot of his books will have, there's not necessarily rhyming, but all the words begin with the same sound. That is a perfect way to teach the students to recognize the onset of a word. And finally, you're building up to the phoneme where they're able to break down that word into its individual sounds, d, o, g. So as you can see, it's really a journey, but it's all building up to one, but you really don't want to skip them. So if you're having a child, having problems with syllables, then go ahead, call the dog, read some books, have fun, make sure, sing songs, twinkle, twinkle, little star, see how it breaks down the syllables in the song. So that's great work to do at that level. And then, so we're going to share the slides, but here, these are some resources you can go and get more ideas. Florida Center for Reading Research has a bank of activities that you can use for your students in all aspects, from phonological awareness to comprehension work and vocabulary work. It's really amazing. Now we're going to go into phonics and decoding. So phonics describes the study of the relationships between graphemes and phonemes. So graphemes, the written word, phonemes, the spoken word. Learning how letters represent sounds is phonology, and seeing words in print is orthography. So that helps novice readers to attend to speech sounds. The National Reading Panel found using a systematic phonics approach provides a significant contribution to children's growth in reading, especially when it's introduced in kindergarten and first grade. It even has the added benefit on a beginning reader's comprehension. So remember what I said. So the alphabet is an invention of a group of written symbols created to represent speech sounds. And if you ever watch a YouTube video on how letters in English were created, it's a hoot. It's quite funny, So it really is an invention, and we decided to just stick with one, and that's it. We're writing it. So reading a word uses grapheme to phoneme knowledge, and spelling a word requires the phoneme to grapheme understanding. So a young reader looks at the word hat and breaks or segments the letters apart, saying the phonemes at, representing the letters, and blends the sounds together to read or say hat. And you see how here we have that open sound that's continuous, so it makes it easier for our child to read. Now, here is a game I like to do, the letter card dialogues with my students, because sometimes they'll know the sounds, but they're just having a hard time putting them together. So I'll say, find the letter that says I, name it and place it. And they take I and they put it in front of them. Find the letter that says T, name it and place it. They find T, they say T, place it after I. What does it say? They say it, okay? And then if that says, oh, I made a mistake there. So if that says it, make it say, oh dear, I'm so sorry, I made this mistake for you all. So just pretend that I told him to get an N, okay? So it's in, and then if that says in, make it say tin. So he has to grab the T, put it in front of in to read tin. You see how now we're manipulating sound, but now we're relating it to the actual letter and to the words, and they're creating. If that says tip, make it say nip. So now we are taking away the T and replacing it with the N. If that says nip, make it say nap, and my students love this. So it's another way to help them decode that's engaging, that's fun, and you're doing it in a way where you're setting them up for success because they know these sounds. And then you see at the end, I did a challenge. I added a blend. So if that says nap, make it say snap. Oh boy. Now, you know, that for some of our students can be really tricky. So they have to put the S, and you'll see them play. Sometimes they'll put all the letters back, and just give them that time to process it, to manipulate it. It's really important. You go as fast as you must, and as slow as, no, you go as fast as you need to, but as slow as you must. Sandra, would you put the right quotes on? Because I want to make sure it's clear if you're there. Okay, reviewing short vowel sounds. I have a student who had a very hard time with short vowel sounds, and what we did was he loves Pokemon. So I went and I found all the Pokemon that, you know, started with the sounds that I wanted us to work on, and he loves these cards now. So he asks, can we do the Pokemon cards? And we'll say, okay, and I just show him the cards, and he says, A says A, O says O. And thank you, Sandra. Go as fast as you can and as slow as you must. So we want to get them to be good readers as fast as we can, but we don't want to skip anything important. So we'll also follow our students' lead. So this is one way, you know, introduce and integrate what your student loves. And they find it engaging. And they also think you're really nifty to pay attention to their passions. Now, the backing up procedure, if you've got a child reading a text with you, our hearts go out to our struggling readers. And if we see them stumbling on a word, and let's say it's a word where they know the sounds, you know, not a word where the letters are not behaving the way they should, so there's no way they can decode. I'm talking about words that they can actually decode, but because you have blends, they're having a difficult time with it. You will use the backing up procedure. Remember what I told you about vowels are open and consonants are blocked. This is where it comes in really useful. So you tell them, all right, you know, find the vowel in the syllable. The vowel is U. All right. Is this a closed or an open syllable? Some will be like, what are you talking about? You're like, well, does it end in a consonant? Yes, well, consonants close the mouth. They're blocked. So it's closed the door on the vowel. The vowel can't shout its name. It has to be short. So the U is going to say What comes after What comes after All right? So they're doing this. You're guiding them, but they're doing this themselves. So they're saying Say, okay, we've got What comes before Plump. They get it. And this is really, really good for our students with also a short working memory, because you have some students who can only keep 3 items, you know, in their working memory at a time. So if they're decoding P, U, A, P, by the time you're asking them to read, you know, they'll say plum, but you know, they can't remember what they said at the beginning. So let's try it again with stint. What's the vowel in this word? I. All right, is this an open or a closed syllable? How does it end? With a consonant, and consonants close the mouth. Very good. So it's blocked. The vowel can't shout its name, so it's going to make the I sound. I. What comes after I? In, int. All right, int. What came before int? Stint. And they did it themselves. So this is gold. I no longer read anything for my students when we're reading decodables. We go through this. It's tedious, but they get it, and they're able to be independent readers much faster. Okay, and then for spelling, something to remember because if they can spell it, they can read it. They're successful. You won. So let's say for the word jug, you will say, watch my mouth and repeat jug. The student repeats jug, and you tell them segment jug, J, A, G. Then you say, name the letters as you write jug, because they've said the sounds. And now as they write, they're going to say J, U, G. And then if they've made a mistake, you tell them, well, check for spelling. Is this the best way to write this sound? You break it down. But what you've done there is they've heard it, they've repeated it, and then they've written and named the grapheme. That's really a good way of doing short spelling work with some students. And then as volunteers, you've got these students that, you want to personalize. I would highly recommend you checking out magicschool.ai, which is, it's like Chat GPT, but it's really for educators when you can create your own resources for that particular child. So if you're not already using these tools, explore magicschool.ai. It's really helpful, like what I was saying about personalize. You can even personalize decodables with your students' name in it, and it's worth exploring. And then non-phonetic words, those words that have a sound that doesn't behave. Draw a heart on that letter that is not behaving, and then show them, we've got this tough word here. We know that H says, so heart, H says, A says, ah, so everyone is behaving. Who's not behaving? The E, so we're just going to put a heart on it, okay? And then finally, one thing I wanted us to look at is fluency. So fluency is the ability to read a text accurately and quickly, recognize words, and gain meaning from text. So fluency, you go from effortful accuracy, reliable accuracy, word automaticity, and then basic reading fluency. That is the progression of fluency. And so fluency practice leads students to decoding effortlessly, and then they can attend to meaning. So important skills for fluent reading are accurate decoding, instant word recognition, and prosody. So prosody is, reading not like a robot, right? It's like, don't read like a robot. And so you want to do repeated readings of the same text. The first reading will be checking for accuracy and check for comprehension. Stan ran into Dan. Oh, what did Stan do? He ran into Dan. What? Who ran into Dan? Stan. All right. The second reading, attention to punctuation and intonation. And then the third reading is read with attention to phrasing. So these are some practices that you can do with your students for that. You practice punctuation with the alphabet. So you just give them the alphabet, but you put the punctuation marks in different places and they have to read it. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z. So you see in this way, you're teaching them about punctuation, but it's not dreary and they're still engaged. And then you can also practice reading with emphasis. Birds fly, birds fly, birds fly, just by changing the punctuation. And there's a lot on the internet as well that you can find that are really funny. And then to practice phrasing, again, you can take the alphabet, break it down, and then put swoops. So then, they're reading A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z. So that's also a fun way to teach them. Now, for some words that they've seen and you want them to learn how to read them faster, you can create rapid word charts. If you go to the Nijhuis Education Center, RWC, if you just type that in Google, it will take you to this amazing Excel report that they created, and you put in your words and it creates this rapid word chart for you. And it's basically a 1-minute drill, and they have to read the words, at least 60 words per minute. It's a good practice before they're going to read the text. You're exposing them to the words that they will already see in the text, and that way they're unencumbered and they can go ahead and read the text. So then comprehension checks. So you have simple questions, explicit questions like who, when, where, what. But then you also want to add those complex questions where, you're bringing the information from the passage and adding it to background knowledge. How, why, what was the author's intention in writing this text? So you're digging more deeply. Now, what I love to do before we read a book, activating background knowledge for our students who don't have rich vocabulary, this is really amazing. You'll put 2 minutes where you say, all right, if the last story that we did was, for example, it was about a barber shop. So I said, okay, for 2 minutes, name everything you can find in a barber shop, and go. And it's like a hairbrush, a comb, hair clippings on the floor, a hair dryer, scissors, a barber, a chair, a sink. And they are, and you can have pictures there for those who have a hard time naming, because for some kids, this is really hard to name. And one of my lecturers taught me good namers are good readers, right? So you want them to learn to name things. So if you've got pictures there of a barber shop with kids, and you get them to just name everything that they see, you're building their vocabulary, and you're also activating the background knowledge for them to better understand the text that's coming. Now, another fun thing to do is once you've read the story, so you finished reading the story, you will retell it in your own words with the key vocabulary that you wanted them, to learn. And you will retell it, and then you will ask them, now your turn. You retell the story and watch if they're using some of the new vocabulary that they've learned. And then, then you can ask them, well, again, what was the intention of the author? And, you go into now the text structure, but this is all, a conversation. But what you've done is there's a rhyme and reason to it, right? There's a point to it, and they are engaged, they're enjoying themselves, but they're also building so many important skills. And that wraps it up for me. I really tried to stay within time because I could talk to you for hours about this. I'm ready for question and answers.
Well, thank you, Coco. I learned so much from working with you and hearing you today. And based on the chat, I can see the same goes for our audience. So if you haven't yet, we still have time. Go ahead and enter your questions for Coco. We've made sure that we leave time for this portion. But we did get a few here to begin with and a few direct messages. So let's start. Let me go ahead and pick one. Well, actually, I'll take this first one just because someone asked, will we have access to this presentation later to review and go over slowly on our own? Great question. We'll absolutely have this available on our Children's Movement website. And Coco, if you're willing to share that presentation too, just because, again, people have found this to be so rich. So you'll be able to watch the video as well. So thank you for that question. We'll go ahead and email everyone that registered for this event, and our ReadingPals coordinators will be distributing this link as well. All right, some questions for you, Coco. Can you give us an example of an exercise or a game that helps with decoding?
All right, so if you've got the students, they already have a bank of letters that they know. So let's see, what is something else that I do with my students well, you could also create cards with each letter. And then, with the student, you'll put like 3 cards and have them read them. And, it's a game of let's create some nonsense words. Let's create words that don't exist with these, with these letters. And so they can put like gud. What's a gud? What are you talking about? And I have a student who is so creative. He'll start creating, he'll start making definitions of this new word gud, and we keep going. And sometimes if he creates a word that's actually real, you can add the aspect of, oh wow, you created a real word, what, how did you read it? Perfect. And you can give them a star or something. Does that answer your question? I'm still thinking, my wheels are still turning as I'm answering. Let's see, what's something else, because I mean, you want to have the visuals there with the cards and having them decode and blend them.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I think that's a wonderful example and something simple that that anyone can do. So another question we have here. One of my reading pals is a 4-year-old child that only speaks Spanish. Are these ideas applicable to him even if he doesn't have that background knowledge in English? So this is a great question for our English language learners. Very common all around Florida.
Well, definitely, build make sure that the vocabulary in Spanish is is expanded. Like having these bilingual books really helps, but you want to explore it first in Spanish. You want to make sure that when it comes to the comprehension work, that it's being done in the language that they speak very fluently, because then they're feeling successful. And then you're introducing new vocabulary in English. When I used to teach bilingual preschool, we had the hardest time with students who didn't have a big bank of words in their native language. So it really, really pays to focus on that native language and making sure that they're also building the vocabulary in that language as they're now learning this second language. Because if they know what it means in Spanish, they understand quickly, they'll learn quickly what it means in English.
Absolutely, that makes sense. So another question here that we have, excellent information. What aspects do you want a four-year-old to master? So this is common for our pre-K students, and one of the most widely reached grades for ReadingPals. So anything specific that we should be focusing on with those 4-year-olds?
Yes, phonological awareness. Oh my goodness. Phonological awareness, the phoneme, manipulating the sounds. You have students in pre-K who still can't rhyme and who go into kindergarten who still can't rhyme. They have to be able to rhyme, to recognize and manipulate sounds. So as much phonological awareness, phonemic awareness. You can do little assessments. You have SGONK. Let's see. No, online there is the Hegarty. They make really nice phonological awareness assessments. You don't need to buy what they're selling, but the way that they've created the assessment is really well made, and it makes it very easy and fast to quickly see what you need to work on with that student and just manipulating sound. If that is all you do, you have won. If they understand how to break down sound, how to rhyme, how to separate, the onset rhyme, how to separate the beginning sound from the rest of the word, how to break down in syllables, call the dog, oh, you've set that child up for success.
Great. So let's see. It looks like we have another one here. As a ReadingPals volunteer, we have limited time with our students. Let's say 30 minutes twice a week. What do you recommend we prioritize after reading our weekly book?
Language. So after you've read the weekly book, were there words there that were more challenging that you can explore, see what the synonyms, antonyms, just exploring their language. Because if they go back into their classroom with a bigger bank of words and vocabulary, it's just that's what they need. Because in third grade, when we're getting to, and you want to even bring higher tier words, don't be afraid of using big words with these children. You are really helping them. They need to be able, because you have the tier 1 words, which are, just everyday words that they learn at home, the tier 2 words, which would be, a bit more, transportation. And then tier 3 is the more scientific, the Latin, Greek words. So you want to make sure that they already have a bank of tier 2 words by the time they get to having to learn the more scientific words. So, there's nothing beats just a high level of vocabulary, and that's what I would do with a student. And I always remember the mantra: good namers are good readers.
That's great. I love that. This one's for some of our older students. Any ideas for spelling without using autocorrect on phone or computers? I know we've all been accustomed to that now with the changes in technology, but for our older students, any ideas for working on spelling without using those systems?
Well, a lot of the time when with the spelling with the older students, that's where you want to see if they need more help in morphology and understanding the semantics of the language. So you have really fun interactive books on morphology. And I would definitely recommend that because, again, you're building the bank of words, but at this point, they're also writing them down. And if you put morphology, interactive books, you get, and it's just beautiful because you have the illustrations and the visuals are there, but then they also have to write the words and they're learning the definitions. And again, I'm giving you examples for volunteers who have limited time in the hopes that the rest of the instruction is happening in the classroom, but supplementing with that is very helpful.
That's great. So you listed a number of resources today. So we have a couple questions asking, can you give us another reminder here on the source of the phonological awareness assessment again?
Oh, did I put it in the chat and did I mistakenly direct message somebody? Yes, I
No,
didn't put it.
I think we saw that there, but if our chat admin can work on that, we'll get that here at the bottom because we've had a lot of activity here today on the chat. And someone also asked, can we get a list of the websites and games that you mentioned? So
Yes.
if you're able to repeat those, we'll have our chat admin make sure to get those in there.
Will you? Okay, hold on. Can't think of everything I mentioned, but are you sending a follow-up email? Probably would it be possible?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
So, we have one more here. My ReadingPals sessions are up to an hour, but the student wants to stop early. How can I encourage her to persist? Great question.
Okay. Yeah, remember I told you that student I made the Pokemon cards for? Like, I mean, there are times he sees me coming and he runs away. So I really have to get very, and I mean, we love each other, but it's like it's gonna be a headache. He knows, oh, this woman comes with headaches. So I would say, no, really, it's get to know, spend some time talking and building that relationship with your students. If you create a schedule, do you have a visual schedule where she's seeing what's coming up next? Because sometimes if they're just in a void and they know that they've got 1 hour with you, but they don't know what's coming up next and what's the point of it, then they lose stamina very fast. But if you have the visual schedule and in that visual schedule, you put in the breaks, for activities that are pleasurable to the student, then they tend to hang in there and you're building the stamina. If they really can't do more than 30 minutes, then keep them still for the 1 hour, but play games. And then later on, what you're seeing is, little by little, the break time can be spread out. I mean, this guy went from, I think, my gosh, I think we first had like 15-minute breaks. We now have 3-minute breaks in between each activity as we move on. So it's really, but meeting them at their level and saying, okay, we have to do this, but I want you to also enjoy it. And I want you to enjoy reading and what we're doing together. So how about, or even how about you put the breaks where you want them? Here's our schedule today. Where would you like your breaks to be?
Great tips. That's so important for our volunteers at the beginning of the year, especially as you're trying to establish that relationship and the expectations and all of that. And I promise for our newer volunteers, it does get easier as you build that trust and you set, again, those expectations for your students. And they're going to improve. Really, it's a matter of time and working with them. So thank you so much, Coco. This has been truly priceless, I feel, for myself, but also for all of our volunteers here. And this is the beginning of something special where we want to share more information with our volunteers to give them tips and tools, reminders for some that they can use. So in the coming weeks, we'll be following up via email with our partners at the Lucy Project to share, again, some of these tips and reminders. So feel free to respond to these emails with your questions or suggestions, or simply sharing a story from your ReadingPals experience. We read all of them. So be sure to visit our ReadingPals page as well as the Lucy Project for more info. You can find both of our websites here in the chat. Again, many thanks to Coco and Sandra Bermudez at the Lucy Project for sharing so much wisdom today, to our Reading Pals coordinators also for organizing the many pieces that we need to make this engine run. And most importantly, all of our volunteers. Without you, this program is simply an idea, but with you, we're changing lives. So until next time, thank you. You'll hear from us soon.
Thank you very much, John, for having me.
Thank you.